Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another interesting session from the webinar series that IKP is sharing with you. Today's session is on uh, storytelling, my entrepreneurial journey, and this is the agenda for today. This is the webinar is organized by CIF, Spursh, and BRIC. So it's a 1.5 hour session that we are having today. We'll start with an housekeeping pointers, which I will just share with you. After that, Madam Ms. Dipanvita Chattopadhyay, she will share an introduction. Then we will move to the speakers, and post that we will have a panel discussion followed by a Q&A. At the last, we would have a thank you, a vote of thanks, and followed by a group photo. Okay, so the housekeeping pointers are, please, it's a sincere request to keep yourself on mute and turn off your video if you are not speaking. The webinar is being recorded and can be shared on request. Please put all your questions in chat window. We will take it up during the Q&A session. And post this webinar, we'll be sharing a feedback link. We would request you to please share your sincere feedback. We would want to improve what we are doing, and your feedback is important to us. Thank you very much. I'll hand over, Madam, to Dipanvita Madam. Dipanvita Madam is the Chairman and CEO of IKP Knowledge Park. She is responsible for developing the first life science research program in India. And Madam, she has got around 35 years of experience. And Madam, I'd request you to please take this forward.
Thank you, Venu. Today is a very special day. August 21st is recognized globally as the Entrepreneur's Day. And so when we were setting the webinar series, we felt that this has to be a session for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs. It cannot be some lectures by mentors or people like me. So it would actually, we want to hear from young entrepreneurs. We have two of them with us, Dr. Venu Polineni and Ravi Bhogu. Venu in the agri space and Ravi from the healthcare space. We also have their mentors and who would introduce. Ravi will be introduced and later after his talk would have a chat session with Dr. Ambu Chaturvedi, and Bindu would introduce Venu. Dr. Bindu Andres will introduce Venu. So just before I hand over to them, let me tell you, this is actually a day where we talk about entrepreneurs' resilience. We talk about the challenges that entrepreneurs have faced and how they have overcome. And that's a hallmark of entrepreneurship. If Ravi says that he's having a problem in finding a space to park his car because there's some construction going on above in the flat above his, and then suddenly he realizes there's too much noise. It's all about this uncertainty, how you overcome uncertainties and become successful. So I think this actually sets a very nice overall tone to add a little bit of drama for to this whole session. So I think this is great. I could have talked about entrepreneurship and how India has seen progressing in the last 5 years in building the ecosystem of entrepreneurs, but that is reserved for another day. Today, we will hear our young entrepreneurs. I hand over to Dr. Ambut Chaturvedi and Dr. Bindu Andruesa from IKP, both of them from IKP. Ambut.
Thank you, ma'am. And yes, I agree. This is nothing short of a melodrama at the last moment. So
I'm enjoying.
Oh, ma'am. So are we. So we plan for this. We plan for every IKP webinar with so much. There's a lot of planning that goes in, and everything is going touchwood clockwork. And then in the last 11th hour, Ravi calls in. You know what, doc? There's some interiors work going on. Too much noise out there. I need to go into my car. I said, that's fine. We still have time. Then he comes up and says, car nahi chal rahi. And you then realize that you have to. So I think, and then he says, no, but doc, we'll figure it out. That's part of the entrepreneur's journey. I said, this is great. So yeah, so without much ado, I'll straight away get. So my name is Dr. Ambut Chaturvedi. For participants all across this webinar, a warm welcome once again. Thank you so much for spending your precious 90 minutes with us. And on this World Entrepreneurs Day, listening to two stories from two different perspectives, from two different sectors. I'm a senior vice president with IKP, have been into this industry for quite some time, first as a clinician, then into the medtech industry. And I have the privilege to welcome and introduce Mr. Ravi Bhogu, who is the founder and CEO of Monitra Healthcare. Ravi, so Monitra is a Hyderabad-based medtech company into remote cardiac monitoring. And he's led R&D, marketing, sales, clinical support teams across into the industry first, then as a consultant, and then moved into setting up his own venture. We'll learn more about Ravi when he talks about his journey. But one thing that stands out, at least from my perspective, from my side, which I want to share with all of you, is that Ravi and I have worked together about 8 years back when both of us were in Johnson & Johnson. And in fact, the journey that we both share is, I moved from J&J onto Medtronic, and then I stayed in the medtech world, came up to IKP, and Ravi moved into the startup world, and now he's on an IKP webinar. So both of us have had different journeys, but IKP is a place where we both found the chance to converge. So yeah, so without much ado, Ravi, over to you. We'd like to hear from you about what your journey has been.
Ravi, your mic is on mute. Ravi, your mic is on mute.
We can't hear you.
Ravi, we can't hear you.
Okay, I guess that's because of the mobile thing. What I would then suggest is, would Dr. Bindu go in and talk about, get Venu in while we sort out this issue, yeah?
All right, I would request Vinod to please put the correct slide up. And warm welcome, everybody. Good afternoon. And I will take the baton from Ambuj and say thank you so much for spending your 1.5 hours with us today. Today being a very special day, we have two entrepreneurs with us. And I have the privilege of introducing one of them, who's Mr. Venu Polineni. And he has joined us today. Thank you so much for joining us. I have known Venu since I joined IKP a year back. And even in the last year that I have known him, I have seen him grow. both his company, his team, his labs, and I think he's going to touch upon that. So a true entrepreneur. And the conversations that we've had over the last 1 year have been very motivating, and it's really, really great to have him at this platform. So I'm Bindu, and by training and experience, I am a plant biologist. I was working at IKP, but in DuPont Pioneer for 8 years. And a year back, I joined IKP. Actually, I celebrated a year yesterday. So I joined IKP, and I manage the agri-innovations at Sustainability Innovation Center at IKP in the Park office. About Venu, Venu founded Telluris in 2015, and he's currently the managing director of Telluris Biotech. Telluris company is focused on developing novel solutions for various crop pests in a sustainable and healthy fashion, which is why I was very excited when he decided to work or start his lab operations from the Sustainability Innovation Center. He has 3 patent applications, and he has overseen them from provisional to national phase in over 32 territories. And he brings with us a triple master's. He has done a MS in biotechnology from Sri Venkateswara University, in biology from California State University, and an MBA in international business from University of California, Davis, which is where I did part of my PhD from. So there is a connection somewhere. So without further ado, Venu, I hand over the stage to you. Please go ahead and share with us a little, your entrepreneurial journey so far, and we would really look forward to hear from you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Bindu. That was very nice to hear. And do we start off with the presentation? Just a couple of things. Yes, we founded the company in 2015, and entrepreneurship and everything. And I didn't know until Dr. Deepanvita had talked about the Entrepreneurship Day, and it's pretty special for me as well. And everyone here on the forum so far, I mean, Dr. Deepanvita has been a mentor for me from day one. And I see Dr. Sangeeta is here, Dr. Ranajit, and Dr. Bindu. Everyone have seen me and our company right from the beginning in India. So whatever I tell is probably very much in sync with the growth story of IKP as well. And at the outset itself, I would like to thank all these people because it was great. I mean, it has been great for us. If there wasn't all the support, we wouldn't have grown this far and to grow. And I'm very thankful for all the support. And thanks for having me over here. I mean, I'm honored that IKP had thought I would add some value to all the entrepreneurs here. So yes, I mean, if Dr. Vinod can put my slides up, that'd be great.
Okay.
Or should I start sharing the screen?
If you can share, you can manage it, nothing like it.
Okay, I can share it. Yeah. Okay. Can you see this?
Yes.
All right. We started the company in 2015, but the research has been going on for what we've been developing from almost 2005. So it was a lot of work in progress before the company was started. And the company Telluris Biotech India Private Limited, we have started as a crop protection company, and we deal with crop protection. We started as a nematologists. Most of us are nematologists. We started as a nematode protection company or crop protection from nematodes. From there, we have kind of like progressed into plant growth stimulants, and now we are looking into insecticides and fungicides as well. And for those who are wondering, Telluris means from earth, and we thought it would be an ideal name for the company, since most of all of the company's development will all be focused on crop protection and plant health. An overview of the company, like I said, we had started with nematologists on board, so most of the work has been done with root knot nematodes, which are plant parasitic nematodes. There was a huge gap in the sector where not a lot of products were available for plant parasitic nematode control. And currently we have developed a synthetic nematicide and also 3 patented peptides, which have been shown efficacy in a lot of solanaceous crops and guava and pomegranate. We've also done trials on potato cyst nematode. On the synthetic nematode, we have done acute tox trials, and then we have done some field trials in vegetable crops, and the product is ready for large-scale trials. We're looking to expand in various markets that have nematodes as a major problem.
Excuse me, Venu, sorry to interrupt. Will it be possible for you to make it full screen?
Yeah.
Maybe zoom in. I know you're using Acrobat. If you could zoom in a bit.
Is that?
Do we see the bottom of the slide? Or you'll have to use your mouse.
This one? Yeah, now we can. I'll have to use my mouse a little bit.
Yeah, I think it would be best if you could zoom in and then just use your mouse to go up and down, so it's more visible to everybody. Will that be okay?
Yeah, that's okay.
All right, thank you.
So, like I said, most of the work depends on the team that we have built, and we've built a really good team. So just to give a brief introduction of our team, there's me. I'm the founder director of the company, and we have Dr. Glenda Weber-Pollack, who has been our collaborator and scientific advisor for close to 13 years now, since we have thought about the company itself. And Dr. Alejandro Calderon-Urrea, who's a scientific advisor, and he is a collaborator for us on all our products. Dr. Saeed Attar is an organic chemist. He has he comes in for a synthetic nematicide space, and he was instrumental in developing the actual active ingredient for the synthetic nematicide. So I was a student of Dr. Alejandro Calderon-Urrea. I started my thesis in his lab, and eventually when we started the company, he came in as one of the co-founders. And Dr. Glenda Weber-Pollack has also worked with me. She was my colleague as well at the UC when I was an employee there. And she came in as a co-founder as well. Apart from the team in the US, we have a research team in India. These are the people who have been instrumental right from when we have moved to a bigger space in IKP. We kind of like started with 2 people. Now we are a team of 11. All this growth has been in the past 1 year. And this is the current setup we have, and we have just started taking in interns as well. And it's just been a month since I've started, but we have a diverse team. Some of them are field trial specialists, some of them are laboratory research specialists, and then some of them are nematologists, and some of them are fermentation specialists. But a very young team. So that has helped us a lot during the pandemic as well. We could work a lot even during the pandemic and develop some great products. This is a very important slide that most of the IKP staff would definitely identify us with. This was the first laboratory. We started in a very small space, and I was the only employee as well during the first labs phase. I'm not writing on the slides. I don't know, someone's scribbling on it. Okay. So Bindu, someone's scribbling on the screen.
Yeah, I see that. Vinod, is it possible for us to take away the rights for editing? I think, is that possible? Venu, please go ahead. Just
Yeah.
ignore it. We'll
Okay, so then that was our first lab, which is a very small space. As you can see, we fit in a lot of stuff into that space. And as you can see, we had our plants also growing in the lab because we didn't want to introduce any nematodes into the open atmosphere. So that was for the nematode cultures. And from there, we moved to a slightly bigger space in the same IKP incubation center, where we could fit in a lot more stuff and have more experiments running at the same time. And from there, after we raised our first round of funding last September, we moved to the current facility, which is at the Sync building in IKP. As you can see, this is a far more sophisticated lab as compared to the first two spaces that you see. The equipment we have is also state of the art, and all the equipment is functional, and we've been able to do a lot more work after we moved here. And that's pretty much about it in terms of introduction. I think I've covered most of it, and I will be covering a lot more during the Q&A and the moderating session, I guess. Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot, Venu. That was really interesting. Like I said, I have seen a large part of this transformation, so I can vouch for it. You've had an amazing journey. Thank you for your presentation. I would like to call upon Ambuj now. Dr. Ambuj, could you please take over? And Vinod, could we have the right slide, please?
Yeah, so what we now need to again try is whether we can get Ravi online again. So the moment of truth, Ravi, can we hear you? Yes, go ahead. Would you want to? Would you want to do a sound check, Ravi?
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me now?
Awesome.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Fantastic. And my sincere apologies for all the shuffling around that IKP had to do because of there's this Murphy's law that all of you, I'm sure, you must have heard that anything that can go wrong will go wrong. So the story is somewhat like that. But as an entrepreneur, the first rule that one must understand is one has got to adapt to the circumstances. So we are here, and thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to talk about my journey. I'll just try to share my screen out here, and we'll get started from there. In case I'm not able to do it, Dr. Vinod, can you share my screen?
I don't have your slide deck, so.
Okay, so can you see my screen here right now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, fantastic. So we'll get started here. Okay. So first of all, my name is Ravi Bhogu, the founder of Monitra Healthcare. I have about close to around 14 years of experience in medical device industry. The first half was into R&D, and the second half was into commercial sales and marketing. When Dr. Ambuj, spoke about the talk out here, so at that point in time, we was, if you give an entrepreneur a podium to talk, they can talk on, for a long period of time and on a lot of things, but I wanted to be more focused and more relevant in terms of, what would be beneficial for our audience. So he said that, this whole journey about from the time at an early stage to now, what are the areas of, my journey that have been helpful to my entrepreneurial success, is something that I can talk about. So I've broadly divided into 4 different themes, across my journey, which have been very critical for, for the phase that we have reached right now. So the first part has been, my orientation around technology. So I started off with my bachelor's in University of Mumbai. I did my electronics and telecommunications degree. From there, in my final year of engineering, I did a project on image compression with ONGC, where we were looking to transmit, satellite images over, telephone lines back then. Based on this sort of an experience, immediately after that, I went to University of Houston, and then there I got a project on video compression. So there was a National Science Foundation grant where they wanted to transmit, video over extremely small bandwidth channels. So that's where, we focused on video compression. The critical skills that I picked up during my master's degree were, pattern recognition, neural networks, which have become very popular at this moment in time, and statistics. Now, it just so happened that when I was presenting my final thesis, there's a scientist from NASA who was on my external committee to evaluate my work that I had been doing in my master's research. He liked my work and he wanted to transmit ECG, ultrasound, and a couple of other biophysiological signals over, low bandwidth channels and wirelessly. So, started working at his company called Global Cardiac Monitors. It was based out of Houston. Now, I spent about 5 years in GCM. By the end of it, I was leading their, R&D across 3 different countries: China, Ukraine, and the United States. Now, the critical skills that I picked up during this stint of mine were, I had no experience on the hardware front earlier. So I got a good understanding of hardware. How do you prototype is a very critical skill. And there are phases of prototyping, and how do you go into production? Is something that I learned from here. Then I did right from hardware, also going down to, writing the firmware for, the products out there, writing it in assembly language. And the other critical skills that I worked on were, when you're working with vendors across, different countries, how do you protect your intellectual property? How do you safeguard it? What, elements that you need to build in your product development is something that I learned out there. The most important skill that I picked up was clinical electrophysiology. So that is understanding the medical aspect of doing things. Then thereafter, from the technology phase, the next phase, which I call it, has been into commercial side. So spending about 5 years with GCM, one of the things that I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. But one of the things that I realized being in a startup is it's very important to understand commercial skills. So the question for me was, how quickly can I get a hang of commercial aspect in a short span of time? And that's when I decided to do my MBA. So I did this accelerated MBA program from Cornell. It is a 1-year degree. There, you learn a lot of subjects. But the most important thing that an MBA teaches a person is critical thinking. So you learn how to grasp, different aspect of things and work with different elements of information. So the critical skills that I picked up during my MBA are accounting, marketing, economics, finance, strategy, and operations. And during that time, I also was working on starting remote cardiac monitoring services in India. So I did my market research, and during my market research, what I found was, from a demand perspective, we have enough number of people in India. But then there were 3 major barriers back then. One was, the infrastructure which is required, which is mobile data and networks, which are very critical, but sort of, nascent back then. Second is the way healthcare is practiced in India and the way healthcare is practiced in the US is very different. There you have a reimbursed market, here people will pay out of pocket. And I didn't find a good co-founder. So I said, okay, let's take a step back and see, what the career has to offer. So luckily for me, what happened was Johnson & Johnson came onto campus. They had a program called as International Recruitment and Development Program. And they had a company called Biosense Webster. It was almost becoming $1 billion company, growing in double digits worldwide. and they wanted someone to do market creation in India. So I said it's a nice opportunity. Came down to Mumbai, headed marketing for J&J. Now I spent close to around 5 years in J&J, and in J&J, I operated in multiple geographies in India, Australia, and a couple of other APAC regions. But then being in marketing and then thereafter sales, there are a couple of critical skills that I picked up, which are very critical to an entrepreneur. For example, in healthcare, how do you do new product launches, and that too at a global angle? How do you work with regulatory? How do you work with reimbursement? How do you work with, manage your inventory? And how do you, ensure that if you're importing goods or products, how do you get that supply chain in place? Then the most important thing is KOL management. KOL means key opinion leaders, critical physicians. How do you work with them? And then, professional education, because see, when we talk about new product introduction, depending on the complexity of the product and depending on who's going to use it, you need to have an educational platform for, say, not just the doctors, but also, the support staff in the form of nurses or technicians or so. And how do you build a capacity of this, doctors? So that's something that I, learned during my stint at J&J. Then at that point in time, it just so happened that, I had a personal incident in my family. My grandfather fell sick. He was admitted in the ICU for about 3 days, and then the doctors came back and said that his heart was pausing for a couple of seconds, due to which he had, say, fainted, and then monitoring him after he was discharged was quite cumbersome. So that was the time when I decided to take a switch and start on my own entrepreneurial journey. So now at that point in time, it just so happened that I decided to call it quits. But then J&J, didn't want me to, leave. So the way I structured this phase of mine was I became a consultant to J&J, helped them with leadership transition, while at the same time started working on my idea. So at that point in time, this is where IKP was very, very helpful. They helped me in terms of, grant writing, what are the critical elements that, one need to focus on while writing grants. And then they also evaluated the application, gave feedback. And then the other critical, thing that I learned during this phase is networking. So it's very, very critical. It's very, very important that you go and meet, as many people as possible. So I went to ISB, I went and met with people with IKP. I met, a couple of other stakeholders, a couple of successful entrepreneurs as well. So, this sort of insights that you get from meeting different people was something that helped me a lot while during this, phase where I was both consulting with J&J and also working on my startup. And then thereafter, about a year and a half, I went full time into my startup. And then the phase that we are in right now, we have done our limited market release over the last 12 months. So our product is a wearable, sensor device, the one that you see on the chest. It does remote cardiac monitoring. So what essentially it does is it picks up all the data from the patient's chest, transmits it to the phone to the cloud, and we do a bunch of analytics. But the critical problem that we're, solving out here is that it's very important to capture data at the time patients have certain symptoms. So at that point in time, if you don't collect data, then the doctors are not able to diagnose. And the problem that we are solving is not transmission of data or wireless networks, but how do you improve compliance of patients? So there's a lot of work that went into the development of our device, where you make it extremely comfortable by using biomaterials. We were able to strike a partnership with a collaboration with DuPont, where they've given us access to the wearables R&D in Silicon Valley, and then we're using their materials in this device. So far, we are operational right now in Hyderabad, Gurgaon, Khammam, Tirupati, Gaya, Panipat, and then we have done close to around 40,000 hours of monitoring, which is equivalent to over 3 years of monitoring. We have captured about 160 million heartbeats. We have 1 granted patent, and then 3 grants we have received, and we are operational in all major hospitals within Hyderabad and the places that I have spoken about. So this is where my presentation ends. I am happy to take any questions there are. But one of the important things that I would like to tell before I end this conversation is that IKP is a wonderful organization. They have a beautiful platform, where they give excellent opportunities to young entrepreneurs, and help them to see through various elements of their journey. So areas where IKP has been helpful for me has been into grant writing. Then how do you file for IP? I had no clue how to, write for patents, who to approach, how do you strike, say, an agreement with them. All these elements are, something that have been possible because of IKP. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Ravi, for your kind words. And I now hand over to Dr. Ambuj and Dr. Bindu to start with the panel discussion. Thank you.
All right. First of all, thank you so much, Ravi. Thank you so much, Ravi. Wonderful presentation. I enjoyed it thoroughly, and I'm sure all the listeners would have to both you and Venu. Dr. Ambuj, you were saying something.
I was actually talking about, so there were a lot of questions which were shared by, participants who, through their registrations. A couple of them, which I thought I would be putting across to Ravi, have already been answered. So so there was this question around when did you plan to take the plunge? There was a very specific question that came across on the medtech piece, which is, if you are a startup based on consumer wearables, how do you relate, or how do you build that relationship and work around with the CDSCO? I mean, I think that is one question that a lot of med device players across in the country ask me. How do you deal with them? So I would phrase it in such a way, Ravi, how do you plan your relationship with them? How do you build the entire set of documentations and plan it through? That would be of tremendous value for folks out here.
Okay. So the short answer to this question is, the first question to ask is, what kind of a consumer wearable device is it? So everything depends on intended use. If it's intended for medical use, where critical decisions are being made by doctors either to diagnose or to treat patients, then it comes under the purview of a medical device. Then you need to get CDSCO approval. But if it's a consumer grade, if it's more of fitness related device, you don't need any medical approval from a regulatory body at this moment in time. So those would be gadgets like, say, Fitbit and related smartwatches that are available in the market. Now coming to the point as to how do you work with regulatory? Now when you talk about regulatory, the most important thing to understand is, from a regulator's perspective, safety comes first, and then comes what are the new features, innovation that you're talking about. So they're mostly interested in how safe is your design, what is your intended use. Intended use means under which circumstances your product is going to be used, who is going to use it. Those are elements that come into play. So there are well-defined guidelines, that define the risk of or the safety risk which is involved. So you have class 1, which is the lowest risk, class 2, which is a medium risk, class 3 is the the highest risk. In India, before the new medical device draft regulation bill came in, the rule of thumb was that any device that goes inside the body needs to be regulated. You need to get regulatory approval. Anything that is outside the body doesn't need regulatory approval. But now things are changing. There are quite a few new devices and new categories that are being added to the notified list of devices. So there is a new window that Startup India has created under CDSCO. So you can approach them with your idea, and then they will help you guide through what are the steps that one need to take to get the regulatory approval. Now when we talk about, say, a medical device per se, whether it's consumer wearable or any other device, there are a couple of steps that have become very important. One is that you need to do early validation trials. Now you need to have an ethics committee approval, you need to have a protocol, all these things one would have to work through. But then it would depend on the specific use case. My suggestion would be is to write to CDSCO and talk to them. And before that, another good way of looking at it is what kind of class does a similar device or a similar category of invention fall into. And based on that, there is a lot of guidance that is there online then you can look into, what are the elements that you need to work on. And from a hardware perspective, there are these worldwide well-defined, medical device standards, 60601 medical device basic performance standards that one need to meet. So you can go through them as well. So these are good starting points to work through.
Thank you, Ravi. So I will have a more basic question, which has been asked by a lot of our participants who are joining for this webinar. And this question is for both Venu and Ravi. That is about being an entrepreneur. So both your companies, I was checking, were registered in 2015. So you've been in a business for around 5.5 years now. So what you did 5 years ago, how different it is going to be if you started your company today. So what would be your key learnings that you could pass on to our viewers and listeners who are attending this webinar as to how different your journey would be, compared to when you started 5 years ago? Venu, you could go first, if you're ready.
Okay, yeah, I'm ready. So, yeah, that's an interesting question, because in hindsight, it's easy to correct a lot of things, at least in hindsight, saying, okay, I could have done that differently or something like that. So in terms of like passing the learnings on to entrepreneurs who would want to start today, I would always tell them to, any entrepreneur who comes, I talk to very few really entrepreneurs. I mean, not many people know me as well outside my sphere. So whomever I talk to, I tell them right from day one, work on something innovative. And I've always believed that, because if you're working on something that can be mass produced, then that market, it's really, you're really not, I mean, there's no future for that, in terms of like, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you have to think at least 5-10 years long term. And if you want to do something that somebody else is already doing, then there is not much value in it as we go forward. Because let's say if you're manufacturing something that is already there, even if you can add one step to it, that will make the manufacturing process easier and your product way cheaper. So then you are an entrepreneur there. You've added a step, or you've deleted a step, and you've made the process easier. That will be a good starting point. So, and another one would be do some research in terms of what you're going to be offering to the public. If your product is way ahead of your time, if you think that, or if your product is way behind the time, it's going to be really difficult to sustain or establish yourself into the market. You will have to most of the entrepreneurs are lucky, I would say. At least there has to be some luck involved, because if you're not at the right place at the right time, if your product is not at the right place at the right time, it's not really, it might not be what you have envisioned for your company or for your product. And one most important thing I would add on and then pass to Ravi is always be ready to pivot, because there will be a time where you will probably realize what you're doing is not what you had envisioned for your company, but there could be some byproduct where you could definitely go ahead and use that for something else. So always be ready to pivot, and that's an advantage that startups have from established companies, is that you can easily pivot. You can easily take a different direction and still make it. So that would be some of the key pointers, I would say. And whatever novelty you have developed or you think you have, always try to protect your intellectual property, be it a trademark or registration or a patent, anything. Protect that as quickly as possible before somebody else does it, so that if all else fails, you have some IP that you can leverage and make something out of your time. Over to you, Ravi.
Thank you, Venu. That
Thanks,
was
Venu.
those are wonderful insights. A few things I would probably do differently based on my experience. There are two things that I remember very well. One is that for all the hardware entrepreneurs out there, we made a mistake of going in for non-certified modules. So when I say non-certified means building say radio frequency devices from scratch. So you need to go through this whole cycle of FCC approval, wireless approvals, every different country that you launch, and then the cycle time for that is much longer. So while we were trying to do that, we tried to go in for an antenna that is extremely small, like a strand of a hair, but it didn't work out for us, and we lost almost like critical 6 months to 9 months in the journey. And the learning for us was always going for pre-certified wireless modules. These are already certified for say FCC and other wireless standards. So now that improves your product development cycle. You're able to get to the market much faster. So there is a time for for changing your form factor, but don't wait for that. You can do that at a later stage. Second learning for us was that I think in hindsight, looking at, I would start selling our products much earlier, because once you have an initial prototype as well, you have things in place. You will always find customers who are willing to pay for it. It's a matter of going and finding those customers who are either willing to evaluate and thereafter also find out are they willing to pay. So you can get to that phase of early customers, paying customers much faster than trying to work on your design, your idea, getting into a more refined form. You will always find the right set of customers, the early adopters, who will give you a lot more insights. You will get far more insights from a paying customer than from a non-paying customer. So those are things that I would do differently now if I were to start again. So these are two major learnings that I've had.
Those are interesting insights, actually. So there are again multiple questions. There are some questions which have been put across, IPs and patents. I would request the people who asked that question. There's an entire series on IPs and the entire IP management strategy that IKP has we've already started on it, and there's more to come. You might want to connect onto that. But coming on to questions related to your entrepreneurial journey. So some very interesting insights coming in from you also, Mr. Venu. So again, a question to both of you. What was the toughest time that you have faced in your journey, and how did you manage it? You can start thinking of it and then let it flow.
Ravi, you can go first.
So I think the toughest time is cash. So how do you manage cash is very important in a startup or any organization for that matter. So you live by say months, you live by days at some point in time. But then the most critical aspect is where you've reached a stage where you have a certain amount of cash, you have certain amount of burn. How do you keep your people motivated at that point in time to tide over that situation? So in our case, I will tell you that we got an initial say the big grant. Okay, so that was an 18-month grant. In about 12 months, we were able to finish off the project. Thereafter, we got the Indo-US Science and Technology Endowment Fund. In between, there is a time gap. So what happens is that when you are working through grant cycles, how do you time and phase out those grant cycles become very important from a cash flow management perspective. Then thereafter, say even now during say the most critical phase came in when the COVID hit us. So when the COVID hit us, essentially ours is a prescription based business model where doctors prescribe it to patients who need such devices from us. So during COVID, what happened was during the lockdown initial phases, doctors were not going to hospitals, patients were not going to hospitals, so there is nothing that was coming to us. So how do you tide over in the situation and keep your people also motivated at that point in time? So the way we structured this aspect was that we focused a lot more on product development. We started working on a product for COVID per se at that point in time, and then sort of like Venu was mentioning, I won't say pivoted, but we have got a separate product line at that point, because of the COVID scenario. But so one is how do you manage cash? is extremely important, because if at any given point in time, you lose sight in terms of cash flows, you are not able to pay people's salaries, and then, it will become a very difficult time. And any organization runs on people. So you have to take care of your people.
Great.
Interesting point. Venu, what about you?
Okay.
Have you?
So yeah. I mean, what Ravi said was absolutely correct, and that is something that I would advise all the startups or entrepreneurs to think about is cash. I mean, you talk how many ever times, you give great lectures, you write amazing, brilliant papers, but your company doesn't have cash, you're out. As simple as that. So always think about that and keep that in mind. So the toughest moment in terms of an entrepreneurship thing for entrepreneurs, there was a lot of talk about this whole mental health related issue for movie artists and everything a few months ago. And I think there should be a series for entrepreneurs as well, because there are multiple tough uh, moments for entrepreneurs. It's just not one or two, because there will be hundreds of different things that could go wrong. I mean, being a leader of a company, even if you are a scientist, even if you had a research background or a sales background, once you're the founder or an entrepreneur, you have to take care of every single problem. You cannot go and complain to any head of the department for them to take care of it. So you have to do it. So in that whole process, you'll come across multiple issues and multiple tough points. And this is one thing. Mental health for entrepreneurs is a very crucial thing. I could totally relate to what Ravi must have gone through between grant cycles, because I know entrepreneurs who are going through similar phases, and I talk to these entrepreneurs, and I also face such agony when it comes to cash, and when you would want to scale up. So we were working, the toughest point, we were working with a company for almost 16 months, and this was a huge MNC, and we were led to believe that they would want our product for exclusive licensing. And in that time frame, we kind of like didn't talk to any other companies who were really interested in our product, because we were led on. I mean, part of it was my mistake. I was too naive, and then at the end of it, after the term sheet was drafted and everything, we got a message from the company's R&D team saying that, hey, so we had huge losses in Europe. Nothing, your product is great. We wish you all the best, but we have decided to put an end on all new product acquisition. I mean, that was gut wrenching. It was 16 months of our time. 16 months of mine, and I had only one other employee at that time. We were running around doing field trials and everything. I mean, it is easy for a big company to say something like that, but a startup who had set sights to grow big, that was gut wrenching. How I got out of it, and I think this is very important for all the entrepreneurs. I had a good support system. I had really good mentors. I had really good friends. My family was really supportive, and I talked to everyone and I told them, hey, this happened, and everyone were supportive. They were like, okay, fine. I mean, you still have a great product. Why don't you start looking into other options? And around that same time, I was talking to a management consultant team. They were very supportive as well, and they helped me cope, and they put us in touch with other companies and everything, and that led to our first funding stage as well. So it was all about my support system I had at that time. But there is, believe me, there is not going to be one single phase where you find it low. It's going to be multiple phases. Even after you scale, it is going to be a challenge. That will be a major problem. I mean, that will bring a new set of issues. Uh, there was one question also, I guess, about how do you let go of people. I think that question will come up at some point. And when you scale up, those are the kind of decisions that you would want to make and everything, because in the beginning it's just only you and one or two other employees, but when your team is big and when you have to let go of someone due to whatever issues. Those are the different set of points once you scale up, and those can be really hard as well, because some people might have been with the company right from the inception. So yeah, multiple stages, but have a good support system, cash, and good support system. Yeah.
No, I think what has come out of both of you is so similar to what we have a lot of discussions, deliberations within IKP, and one of the key things that actually ma'am comes up with is the same thing. With COVID, a lot of these startups actually faced the entire cash flow management crisis, I would say. And yes, IKP did play its own part in contributing to the ecosystem through the ICO fund and other initiatives. But we can so understand what you've gone through. So cash flow management is one piece. Having a support ecosystem, very good advice. I think that's one more thing that ma'am will completely, because she keeps on, reiterating the same piece, which is getting a good support ecosystem. Bindu, you have something in your mind. Any questions from your side?
So, very, very apt, I think, analogies and examples. And thank you for sharing very personal examples. It really means a lot to us. And as Dr. Rambuch mentioned, IKP, through its own initiatives, we have tried to see however we can help or assist, and we've gathered data around it. So my next question is a little different to what we have asked earlier. So now suddenly there is a surplus of cash. Suddenly you get, let's say, $2 or $5 million. So how would you spend it, with your learnings for the last 5 years from your own companies, each of you, and either one of you can go first, how would you spend it? Which aspects of the growth of your company would you spend it? And if you don't need it, that's fine too. But how would you channelize that fund?
I'll go first. I'll let Ravi think, because I know what I want to do with that kind of money. And ours is an R&D focused company. We totally research and development based. We have 3 patents in close to 40 countries now. So what I would do with if I have $2 million is initiate a lot of trials in most of these territories. At least start getting permissions to do trials in most of these territories, and demonstrate these trials maybe in the next 1 year. Use that money to demonstrate as many trials as possible and demonstrate the potential of our product, and also add on more trials, maybe 8 or 9 months down the lane, maybe add on a couple more products to this similar portfolio, and do more trials. So basically use most of it to fund the research and development, and also do a lot more field trials, because that, I think, for any R&D company, that would go a long way, actually.
Thank you, Venu. How about you, Ravi?
So in my case, so we are at a phase where we have seen early traction in the market. So now for us, everything is about scale, and scale. So at this moment in time, as I've shown in my slide, we have about 140 million heartbeats that we have analyzed. In the next 9 months, the goal that we have set for ourselves is we have to hit about 1 billion heartbeats that we want to touch and analyze. And we want to go into a full market release pan-India. And thereafter also, go for regulatory approvals in other markets like US FDA and all. So we would spend our money in 3 buckets. One is regulatory approvals, focus on that aspect for other markets. Second is, for sales and marketing, within India, and in terms of, developing a full-fledged commercial team. This is what we would utilize this money for.
Interesting. There are 2 questions, one for Venu and one for Ravi. The question for Venu is more around, a research-related startup. So the question is, grants are usually available for commercial products, but if someone wants to start a research-related startup, what are the dynamics? How do we do? What are the broad aspects that one needs to keep in mind?
I've written 5 grants. BIG, DBT, SIBRI, BIRAC, the BIPP, and the TDP grant. I've not gotten even a single grant. So I can totally relate to that. But that shouldn't be a deterrent. So how do you get into it? I mean, I bootstrapped until we got our first round of funding. IKP supported us with a seed fund of 15 lakhs right in the inception stage. So what I would say is, I mean, as you keep writing grants or approaching people who have some money as an angel investor or something, it's better to have those sounding boards and believe in your product. I mean, if you have a great product, eventually you will get value for it. And if you know that there is a gap in the market, it is going to be filled at some point. So, I mean, that cannot be a deterrent, because as an entrepreneur, that is a crucial thing, as we had discussed. And you will probably not have a stellar team to begin with, in terms of like, you will not have you'll not be able to pay 10 people, but you can have one person assisting you in all these things and still keep working on the product. So if you're solely dependent on grants, then that's not the ideal way to get into the industry itself, because that is more like an academic approach. Because I worked in a university for almost 6 years, so I know that approach. So that is an academic approach. But if you're looking to get your product into the market from a lab scale to the field, or to the people, then if you have trust in your product, bootstrap. And you have to scrunch. Scrunching is a major part for entrepreneurs. You have to cut deals left, right, and center, and you have to be a pro at that. You have to get to be a pro at that. Somebody wants to sell something to you for 100 rupees, you negotiate it for 10 rupees and see where you land. And Bindu can attest to that. I mean, so,
I certainly can.
so even with, I mean, even though I love IKP and everything, if they come up with me for something, I really try and negotiate, because that is a major part of an entrepreneur. And if you trust your product, bootstrap, and eventually there will be some takers. But keep that in your mind. When you want to be an entrepreneur, it's not going to be easy. Not every single grant proposal gets accepted. There is a huge, I mean, there is a really stringent process. And at that point in time, your product might not be, I mean, it might not seem valuable, but that is not a validation you could be looking for if you want to start a company. So yeah, that's my take on it.
Those are very interesting insights. And I mean, a point on the scrunching piece with IKP, I would say, you know, IKP does value talent, so they know where to. So we do respect talent a lot.
All right, over to Ravi.
Yeah, no, Ravi, I have a separate question for Ravi. So Ravi, the question is coming from a gentleman named Vijay, and you know he's asking about pre-market launch. So he's saying, you know, I mean, you know, if Vijay is out there, listening, correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I got your question is, how do you plan a pre-market launch of a non-invasive medical device? And what he's trying to arrive at is, how do you gain customer traction and feedback even before you've gone in for the launch? Any kind of insights around that, Ravi, would be helpful.
So the thing, I would say, you know, it's still every entrepreneur views at a launch in slightly different mechanism. I can share about our journey as to what we were trying to do with a pre-market launch, and our reason for a limited market release rather than a full market release upfront. So there are a couple of things that we looked at. One is that whichever territory that we wanted to enter in, our goal out there was we wanted to gain more than 50% market share in the certain geographies that we launch our product in. So, and we had a limited pool of money. So that's something that we had to do really well and be very focused in these particular markets and get good feedback from the customers. So that was one criteria for us. Second criteria for us is that when you go into a pre-market launch, in our case, we didn't go into a full-scale production yet. So before we go into full scale production, and before we complete our a production grade product, we also wanted to get good feedback from the market on the product side, which we will incorporate in our design for manufacturing cycle. So that's the reason that we did our pre-market launch for. The third thing that thing that we wanted to do is, see, we did a lot of work on the technology side, but then when you go to the market teaches you a lot now, and that is where your business model comes in. So we wanted to evaluate a couple of business models. What is the right pricing that's going to be for our product? Can we do it with feet on the ground? Can we go through certain channels? So channels that we explored are, say, distributors. Can we strike certain partnerships with pharmaceutical companies? Those are things that we wanted to iterate during a pre-market launch, because see, the mistakes that you do in a pre-market launch, your mistakes will not be as costly as in a full market launch. So we wanted to learn from these small initial launches, and thereafter go into a full-fledged launch is the full market.
Those are pretty, and I'm hoping that Vijay's question has been answered. But Ravi, I'll tell you one thing, and after that I'll pass on the baton to Bindu. When you talked, your first line that you talked, you said, I don't get into a market where I don't have 50. It reminded me of J&J, Johnson and Johnson. People who have been trained in the J&J philosophy know that we never used to get into a market where we have to be either number one or number two, or we don't get into that market. So it was kind of reminiscent of those days.
I totally agree. I think it's just that you're imbibed in a certain philosophy, and you work according to that. So, and you want to be in a market, and you want to be a major player in a certain market, and that's the reason you innovate.
Yeah. Bindu, over to you.
Right. Well, very interesting discussion. I have one more point that I would like to touch upon, which is about a co-founder. So both of you have had companies for 5 years, and we would all like to hear your take on, the benefits of, first we would like to know whether you have a co-founder or not. And if you do, how did you identify that person? And if you don't, then how do you see the market perceiving or looking at your company, especially the investors, from an investment point of view? What message would you like to convey to budding entrepreneurs? Both of you.
Ravi, you want to start, or shall
I can start.
Yeah.
So with respect to a co-founder, the way I went about when I started my journey was that I come with a certain amount of skill set. So where was my expertise? So my expertise was on, say, R&D to a certain extent, and say commercial sales and marketing. But then the kind of product that we eventually wanted to get into the market involved a lot of, say, hardware. It involved getting a lot of data insights, and it involved a lot of software information systems. So I was looking for people with certain skills. So the critical skills that I was looking at is someone who had a good understanding of information systems, right from app development to cloud usage. And then after the data reaches there, how do you make insights from the data that comes through? Because see, in the business that we are in, the doctors are more interested in the insights that we give, not the data. So I needed certain people in with these two skill sets. So luckily for me, what happened was that my wife, she has a good sort of background in information systems. She's got a degree from Carnegie Mellon. She's worked with TIBCO, TCS, and Lehman Brothers. And it just so happened my brother was working in Oracle. So, and they decided to take the plunge along with me. But then the criteria that we put for ourselves was, we are doing this because, all of us have had, say, lucrative careers. For us to leave our career and join a startup where the future is uncertain and there's a significant amount of risk. Okay, we've got to be passionate about the problem that we are solving. So that was the first criteria that we set out for ourselves. Second thing is that there's a certain time frame that we put amongst ourselves. Say for a period of 2 years, 3 years, even if it doesn't work, or if it works, what are we going to do? Those are things that we set out. Then the third, or rather the most important thing is, how do we manage conflict? So my brother asked that, okay, if I fight with your wife, okay, whom are you going to support, your wife or me? So, those are hard questions that one needs to answer, and you need to have a mechanism, in place to deal with that. So this is how we approach. I was lucky that I found it internally. Now there is another element to the question: is how do investors perceive this thing? So when we talk about investors, so we've had a couple of so we raised private investment as well. So there are two schools of thought in investing world. So when you have a husband and a spouse, co-founders, some people view it negatively, some people view it positively. Okay, so you have to find the right set of investors who believe in what you're doing and who believe in the team per se. So it's a matter of finding the right match for yourself. So there's no right or wrong answer in this particular aspect.
Okay, so for me, it was easy, I could say, because my co-founders were my collaborators from a long time, from 2007. So we were working on similar projects, and when I said, so all of us had regular jobs, but when I told that, well, I'm going to quit and start the company because somebody has to put in their 100% into this, and then just keep going from there. My collaborators were more than happy to hand the reins over to me from that point, and it has been good. No problems. I mean, obviously there is going to be some type of conflict in terms of the decisions that are taken, but since I've known all these people for so long, and they know me, and how we run the company and everything, so we have set up a few guidelines from day one of how the company should be run, and also build a culture for the company right from day one, and we try to stick to that, even in terms of the SOPs we write, and the kind of projects we take in, and the team we select. Usually even if we hire, it's usually going to be, all of us can, if it's going to be a major hire, we take a decision, but other than that, I have a lot of uh, autonomy, and one of the key aspect is trust. I mean, if anyone doesn't trust, if even one co-founder doesn't trust the other co-founder, your time would be spending you'd be spending a lot of your time on conflict, uh, this thing in kind of like taking care of the conflict, in as opposed to running the company. So build trust. And the second thing is, how do investors see that? If you have a strong team, and if your product is backed by a really strong team, it's always a plus point. There is no two ways about it. And your co-founders, depending on the responsibilities and everything, how the responsibilities is shared between all the people involved in the company who started the company, if it is well defined, it's always a plus point. So it's better to start off. A lot of entrepreneurs would think, okay, let me first build the company and then establish a culture in the company, or establish proper guidelines in the company only after it become big. That I think is not going to fly anymore with so much, so the regulatory or anything. So it's better to start off think a big company, establish everything properly, even with your co-founders, so that when you grow big, you are ready for it. So you're always thinking you want to grow big, right? So you have to be ready for it. If you feel that you can get ready when you grow big, then it's a recipe for disaster.
Thanks, Venu. Very interesting.
Those are very valuable points. In fact, the point around putting processes in place, putting in, I mean, you're actually molding, or you're balancing between people management and process management, and basically complementing the two. For the viewers out here, there is going to be a dedicated set of sessions only on total quality management, QMS and all. And as both Ravi and Venu have pointed out, that's critical. So these are all building blocks of your entrepreneurial journey. One question that came in, and I mean, both of you can go, it came in the agri sector, so maybe Venu could go first, but then it actually applies to both. So it's about government business. How do you deal with government business? And the moment now I can see Ravi smile, but so We all know that that is a very complex game due to multiple reasons, and but it's a very interesting game. And so, two different sectors. You have an agri sector, you have a med device sector. How do you see working with the government? Easy, not easy? I guess that is an intuitive answer. But how do you do it? What are the broad principles that you use when you deal with the government?
Okay, so I can tell from experience, and that's what I'm going to be addressing mostly this question especially. There is a lot of negative feedback about the government and how the government impacts any startup or any business for that matter. Some of that might be true. I mean, for a startup, if you're going to start up, there are single window clearances for a lot of things. And obviously, everyone wants government support, but nobody wants government's involvement. It's a very paradoxical this thing. Personally, I have tried to stay away from a lot of these things. If I need something, I go first to the IKP setup, and then anybody who is linked to the IKP setup, and then because since we have been incubated in IKP from the beginning, and even now we are at the Sync building, most of the permissions and everything required for R&D are already taken by IKP. We just get those things passed on to us. The few interactions I've had with the government officials related to PCB or permissions related to PCB or MSME. So I will tell you my experience. I mean, there was a lot of talk. I had talked to other companies, established companies. I'm like, so I need to get some kind of permissions. How do you get it? Oh, it's a headache. You need to go through this, go through that. So as an entrepreneur, you have to drill this into your mind. You always have to ask. The worst you can get is a no, but you always have to ask. So I got a call from some related government official when we filed for the application, and I asked him, like, who are you? Like, why are you calling me? Then he's like, oh no, this is related to this application. And I'm like, so what do you do there in that particular office? Then he's like, no, I'm the clerk of this office. Like, do you sign on this document? I said, no, I don't sign on this document. Who signs on this document? Then he said, some officer. I said, give me his number. And then he's like, no, you can't talk to him. So I said, okay, fine. I went to that office and I said, here I am. I gave the card. I said, I want to talk to you. And then that guy was intrigued. And then like I said, the worst you could get is a no. So I walked in and I told him, see, I'm an entrepreneur. Moved back and set this up, and I need support. And if I'm not getting this from your office, then I mean, you tell me what you want, but I need this. And it was mind-blowing for me. The guy said, oh, we need people like you here. And that was one. The other one was during the pandemic. Everyone was struggling to get passes. I stay 45 kilometers away from IKP. So for me to get here, at least because we have a glass house with almost 2,000 plants, and one of us had to come here. And at that time, we still hadn't gotten the e-pass system. You have to go and talk to somebody. I went to the police station. I said, see, I'm an entrepreneur. I want to go because the plants will die. I don't want to give you any false reasons. And then he said, what? And then he signed it and said, you have to go and talk to the commissioner of police. I actually went and talked to the additional commissioner of Hyderabad during the lockdown. I went to the office. I waited for 3 hours because obviously they were all very busy. Took my letter and said, here, I'm an entrepreneur. I have 2,000 plants in the lab. I need a permission for one person at least to go to the office every day and work. And he was very supportive. He said, great, I love your enthusiasm here. And from that day, every day, Bindu can attest to it, we had 2 people at least coming and taking care of our plants. So yeah, you will get 100 different, like I said, you will get 100 different roadblocks. This is one of the roadblock and you have to cross it. There is no other way around it. There might be red tape, there might be whatever, but as an entrepreneur, you have to be mentally prepared to do it. And I think you'll become a stronger and you'll come out of it better, and your company will also last longer if you go through these hoops. If you don't go through these hoops personally, uh, I mean, it's very difficult to kind of keep going every day. You have to wake up every single day and feel, okay, today I want to keep, at least you hope that you'll have only 10 roadblocks that day. So it's, that's how you think.
That's no. This is brilliant, Venu. This is exactly what startups and would-be entrepreneurs would want to know and would want to hear from you. The kind of, in fact, IKP keeps on interacting with so many startups every day. We have stories in the COVID place where one of the startups, the gentleman drove down to Coimbatore for the CITRA certification, bang in the midst of the lockdown. And we all know, I mean, IKP family knows that that gentleman today is doing so good, and IKP is always. But the point is, there are so many stories out there, but it's good to hear one from the horse's mouth, which is you. What about you, Ravi? Let's talk government from a commercial. So Venu talked about government from managing from as a bureaucratic machinery, but from a commercial angle, if you're looking at a government business, what kind of dynamics? Any 2 or 3 takeaways, because we just 7 minutes now. So yeah.
So the thing is that like Venu mentioned, government is a great facilitator. It will help you in terms of solving a certain problem that you may have in your business. But when it comes to as a purchaser, one needs to have long cash flows to manage government as a purchaser, because the payment cycles are very long, and also your ability to get in through, say, tendering mechanisms is quite a long process, because the kind of criteria that they set is you need to have 3 years of working business, good P&L. These are aspects that startups don't have. Having said that, a couple of state governments have eased out these requirements in order to promote startups from getting into the procurement side from the government stuff. But my personal viewpoint is try to avoid government, because at the end of the day, everything is about cash flow. And then there are a lot of, say, multiple stakeholders within government who need to sign off on before you get your cash or your project on. The way we did it is, so for a recent project for COVID-19, we came up with a product called Be Safe. So where we did our initial pilot with the government quarantine center in Eragada. It feedback was really good. The Hyderabad collector put in a very strong recommendation. We also did a project with the Hyderabad district police using a product. But it's just that the cycle for approvals within the government were too long. It made it much easier to approach, say, private hospitals and other machinery, where we got our product going much faster. So that is, by my experience, is that the red tape and also the long cycles of getting the money out of government is quite a challenge. So you would rather focus on the private market and get going much faster. But this is my experience. This is what I've seen. There may be some other bright spots, but one will have to look at that.
Looks good. So what I'll do is, we only have 5 minutes, and there are a couple of questions coming in. So there's Pratyusha, there's Shamila. They've asked a question on moving from academia into business, but there was another set of questions moving from commercial to entrepreneurship. And so I'll combine the two for both of you, which is it easy for someone if he or she has a commercial background to move into entrepreneurship? Vice versa. Is it difficult for someone who has been in the academia to move into entrepreneurship? The first question is for Ravi, second is for Venu, but we just have 4 minutes, so we need to quick on.
So my short answer on this, Dr. Ambuj, is that every person, based on their experience, bring a certain perspective to the game. But business is a multi-variable problem that you need to solve with different skill sets. So it's very important to get the right skill set, involved in the team, so that you get disparate opinions on the table when you have problems, and then you think through the decision making to arrive at them. So I won't say this is easy or that is easy, but one needs to be cognizant that these different skills are required for decision making.
Diplomatically answered. Venu, your 2 lines.
Entrepreneurship is difficult. It's not easy. 99% of the startups fail. So then if it is easy, everyone would be doing that. Why would anybody look for jobs and everything? So that is number one. Number two, like as Ravi said, build a team that complements your skill set. Either from commercial, if you're coming from commercial side, you will probably need somebody in the analytics and everything, like how Ravi needed. I've been coming from the academia side, even though I have some business degree and stuff, but we built our team around a different skill set who can kind of run some field trials and also give some management consulting advice. So it all depends on how strong a team you build and how the other team members complement your skill sets. So it's definitely not an easy thing either way, but it's all about how you make the whole thing easier on yourself, and that will depend on your team a lot.
Thank you, Venu. That was crisp. And with this, Bindu and me, we both thank you, and we now pass on the con to Vinod. Vinod, over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ravi and Mr. Venu, for your time. Very thoughtful discussion, a lot of inputs. I think we wish this session could go on for longer. Thank you so much. So on behalf of IKP and the entire team who has joined us, thank you very much for your time, and thank you everyone for sparing your time. And I hope you had a lot of learnings from this discussions which we had. Thank you so much, Dr. Ambuj and Dr. Bindu, for your moderating this session. And thank you, ma'am, for as always, you're here behind us and supporting us. Thank you so much. So we would quickly require everyone to switch on your videos so that we can have a small session here, photo session here for our memories.
And here I want to say cheers to all entrepreneurs here. So a big hand to all entrepreneurs.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so I have the memorable moments for today. Thank you so much for everyone. Thank you for joining, and I just close the session. We'll have many more sessions coming in the next few weeks. Please tune in to those. We'll send you invites. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Have a great weekend.
Right.